So what we're going to do in this piece, it's in the key of D flat major, which is 5 flats. And for the most part, I'm using the Biz key. So any of the flat keys, F, B flat, E flat, A flat, and D flat. I like to use the Biz key, which is the B key here, plus this smaller key, and you cover it with both fingers like that. There are 3 B flat fingerings on the saxophone. So it's the Biz key like this, with the B and the other little key with one finger. The A, you finger an A with the side bottom key, so that's also a B flat, and also the 1 and 1. And the 1 and 1 is the one we use the least. So the main one you want to focus on is like this A and the B flat, and in this particular piece, we'll use the Biz key a lot. Articulation in this piece, that depends on the speed, and in general, when I feel like we're playing it faster, the value of the articulation might be just to kind of delineate the meter a little bit. So if, for instance, if I play it in a nice easy, let's see, if I started it out at, let's see, the music is telling us 70 or faster, but maybe I can back up a step from that and say that we shouldn't play it at 70 or faster, we can't play it at 70. So I would back it up to whatever speed you can play it at. I use the Tonal Energy Tuner app, and that has a metronome on it. So I, generally speaking, put it on 1/4 on the meter, and then on this key, on the beat, I put it on a quarter note. So quarter note on the beat, 1/4 on the meter, and then the subdivision is a triplet from the 8th note triplet. So if I put it at 50, so now if we deal with the articulation like this, we're going to probably be really specific because you'll hear it a lot more than it would at a faster tempo. At a faster tempo, we will play it, but you're almost in a 1 or even more than a 1. You're kind of seeing entire numbers of bars in a sense for the faster tempo. So this will be 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. And I'm probably instinctively doing a little crescendo, like an immediate subito piano. And if I were to follow the music a little more specifically, I would wait for the second one. So let me try that for a second. So I'll follow the music a little bit more specifically like I should. So the first is mezzo forte, second bar, a little more crescendo. The other question I have is, or one can work through, is you have 5 flats: B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, and G flat, which is the same as F sharp. And when you're playing a chromatic scale, if you were to play an F like this, and then put this third ring finger down on this key, you'll get an F sharp. And we also know that this is F to F sharp like this with the middle finger. On the saxophone, we tend to use the chromatic fingering when it's possible. So if you're playing a D flat major scale, you'll often use this key. In this piece, at the speed, my choice was to actually flip over. And sometimes people will say you shouldn't flip, you shouldn't flip, you should always, when you have the opportunity to use the chromatic key, you should. But I find that this piece went by so quickly that I only wanted to worry about one thing. When I play a G flat, my finger goes to one finger. And that's a choice we all make, and that will be coming back to you all as you working through these pieces, this piece in particular, with your tempos. And as you get the piece and the notes learned more under your fingers in sections, and we can talk about that in a second, then you'll go ahead and decide what works best for you. So my advice is that do use your chromatic G flat when you can. Remember, G flat is like an F sharp. But if you find in this piece that flipping works for you and it does not disrupt the rhythm, which is the key really, then the rhythmic pulse, in other words, then I would say it's okay to flip over. I have practiced the flipping quite a bit, so I feel pretty equal between the flipping over F to F sharp or G flat and this one. But I'm going to leave that up to you all according to what tempo you get this to. And it's a good exploration process for you. The way I look at this piece is you'll work it through a bunch, and then you're going to start to put little pencil brackets over certain bars that will be a little bit problematic. And so I'm going to give you an example of how I practice these. Let's go kind of out of order, because if we practice the end first, that has a couple of tricky passages in there at the end, and you can get all through your piece and everything's going great, and you get to that last line and you had not spent enough time with it, or at least as much as you had in the beginning of the piece, and you may make some mistakes there. So let's work through the last line a little bit, and that's essentially the first about the first four measures of the last line. So this is a case where I'm playing a D flat, and there's a C flat, which is the same as B natural, and now I'm using my side B flat key, not the biz key. So one little idea here is that these are, once we do that first group, which is 5 notes, after that there are 4 note groups. And it can be a little confusing counting because we're in 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And all of a sudden, after that first 5 note group, he's really kind of in a 2. So one and two and 1 and 2. I was leaving little spaces there. Something I did when I was playing the faster tempo that I should probably improve on is I was playing the original fast tempo so fast that I really probably didn't do enough of the accents. So those accents kind of give us that sense of that maybe a sort of underlying mini meter within the 3/4. You can call it kind of a hemiola. You hear 2 at once. So for instance, at the end, there are a few spots in this piece that call for some articulation, actually 2, to be honest. The very second to last bar, that D flat major arpeggio going down, descending. And then from the bottom up, the third line, you have a B flat minor arpeggio. So let's talk about a couple of those things. When you start a low note on the saxophone with a tongue, it's helpful to take your F key off the first finger right hand and pop it down, meaning depress it at the same moment you're expelling the air into the instrument, and at the same moment that you're gently tonguing the reed. So let's kind of break that down a little bit. Articulation on the saxophone is we put our tongue on the reed, we blow air, so now you have pressure against the reed and mouthpiece opening, but nothing's coming out because your tongue is on the reed with a gentle enough pressure that it's just keeping the reed from vibrating. So tongue on the reed, step number 1. Step number 2, blow the air. Number 3, release the tongue. Number 4, put the tongue back. Well, all of those steps in a piece like this that are very fast kind of happen almost simultaneously. So what I do on this particular piece, when I have to play that third line from the bottom up, that D flat or the B flat minor arpeggio, I have to pop my F key a little bit and really use a little extra force of air to get that low D flat to speak. And if you want to really give it a little extra assurance on there, down in the low B flat, pretend that we have the top teeth on the mouthpiece here and the bottom jaw, and the lip touching the reed. The lip is touching the reed. And you have just enough pressure there to make air not leak. And now the tendency when you go higher on the saxophone is to kind of bite down into the reed more. And then we tend to get sharper. So my first thought is to keep just an even amount of pressure. The top teeth rest, they don't clamp down, they just rest on the top of the mouthpiece. And the bottom jaw, there's only one jaw, not the bottom or the top, in a way. So the jaw just nudges up against the reed so that there's just enough pressure. And we also want to try to avoid air leaking. So once we have that amount of pressure set for instance, your high B flat, when you go to play your low B flat, I kind of open up a little bit so that in addition to popping like a really quick pop of my low F key, that little bit of opening up with a little extra force of air helps me to let that reed vibrate a little bit easier or a little bit more quickly on the low D flat. An exercise could be, you could work your way up a scale. For instance, let's use a D flat scale and let's play up the scale but always returning down to the D flat. So for instance, and this would mean we'll have to learn our D flat scale. So it's got 5 flats: B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, and G flat. So I think I might not have said that earlier in the video. Sorry about that. So let's go ahead and start from a scale. And actually, when you get to A flat, you can keep your little finger down on the C sharp D flat key. And I have to really use a good amount of air. Now, my particular saxophone is a little resistant down there. It does not have leaks per se, meaning the pads don't leak on the tone holes, but it's a little more resistant. Some other instruments have a lot easier response down there, and so if your instrument, which make sure it's in good working order before you make your audition video, if your instrument's in good shape and those low notes respond well, you won't need quite as much air. Like I said, in my case, my instrument has a little bit of extra resistance down there, which actually compensates for some other things that this nice Selmer reference 54 can do. But in this case, it just requires extra effort to get those notes to speak down there. Okay, let's get back to practicing again. So I would say that the last line, I work this in 2-note groups. And actually, that was 3-note groups. In other words, 2 notes plus land, 1 and 2, 2 and 3, like this. And then you work in these small units. So and little by little work through it. Let me go through that so you see the example. So what I'm doing is as early in the process as possible, I try to basically learn the music. I know that sounds kind of silly, but I'm trying to learn it without looking at it. And I don't want to use the word memorize per se, but if I'm depending on having to look every single time I play this piece, is that a D natural? Is that a G flat? What is that note again? What's that accidental? Then I really don't know the piece. So let's kind of, in a way, be like Quizlet and quiz yourself a lot. And so play the phrase once, look away. Do you know it? No? Okay, go back and see what you made a mistake on. Correct that mistake. Go back again and see if you know it. If you don't know it again, maybe there's another note. And little by little, one by one, you'll start to learn the notes of the piece. Now, it's not necessarily to have you play the piece from memory, but it's to have you know those particular passages that have lots of accidentals in them, really internalized. So you don't have to think and look so much at every accidental. Let's see, we touched on fingerings, we touched a little bit on articulation, and we touched a little bit on practicing. Practicing meaning working on things in small units. I would say the metronome is a good friend here in this particular piece, so use your metronome. Play extra dynamics when you can. If you're playing at a slower tempo, then it's going to be a little tricky where to breathe. So let's actually talk about that. So let me try to pull up a tempo. Let's start it out, say at 40. Actually, let's do that. So I have my metronome at 40 on triplets. So now I'm going to need a breath somewhere in the middle of all those 8 notes. So I'm going to get a quick breath, like that. And I'm going to try not to lose time. Also, though, I may need halfway through the piece to actually let air out instead of taking it in, so I don't sort of hyperventilate. So be aware that you're going to practice your breaths. Once you get the speed up to what is a comfortable speed for you, practice, mark them in your music, by the way, mark in all those breaths, and then practice taking them. So you work in sections now. So for instance, earlier you worked on sections of notes you were trying to learn, but now you're going to practice sections where you're actually just practicing how to breathe. Where's my breath mark? I'm going to practice that one section over and over, taking my breath. Let me give you an example of that. I'll start the piece, I'll find the place where I need to breathe, and then I will rehearse that little spot, just taking that breath. Even though I'm taking it out of context, I'm not needing to breathe there. I'm going to practice putting the breath there. And what I'm doing is I'm keeping my top teeth on the mouthpiece, my lower lip on the reed, and I'm just grabbing the breath out of the corners. Like that. And I'm not grabbing a really full big breath like I normally do from down below. And then up here, I often think of breathing as this big beach ball down here. And then the top one fills up, so you have a very big sort of imaginary tank of air. I don't have time to do that here. The only thing I do have time to do is at the beginning of the piece, and then there's a couple of spots where there are rests that I'll kind of let the air out and then take it back in. The last thing I guess I can talk about is phrasing, besides maybe not the last thing, but tempo we can talk about too. The phrasing, we should try not only just for speed and accuracy, which are really important, not that speed is the faster the better, but that a consistent speed all throughout the piece is what we're striving for, and accuracy of notes. So if you play all the right notes, and you play all the right articulations, and you have a pretty comfortable speed and it's under control, and then you sprinkle on top some dynamics, so it sounds like you're leading phrases one bar to the next or one group of bars to the next, then you're going to play really musically. You're going to have a wonderfully successful performance. So now I can maybe just mention a quick word on tempo. I know in the rules that they say 70 or faster, and some of you may not feel you can get it to 70 yet. You may not have enough technique, you may not have worked in this particular key for a while, or ever rather. So what I would say is, and I always forget to say this in the videos at the beginning, and I always say it at the end, practice your scales. Practice your D flat major scale. And learn your scale a little bit. So once you do that, then go back in and start to really be a little bit exaggerated with your dynamics. Use your metronome. I've said this a couple times, but use your metronome and know your tempos. Know your comfort zone tempos, and then know where it's pushing a little bit. So I'll give you an example to kind of wrap this up. If we say our tempo is going to be 70, here's 70. But then I say, okay, let me see if I can go faster. And so I put it at 72 or 74 or 76. Here's 80. Okay, I made a mistake. So I say to myself, I'll rehearse it again, I'll go over it again. Is that a breaking point for me? Does that mean where it's feeling out of control? Maybe it was just an inadvertent mistake. Okay, that worked. So little by little, you push your tempo up higher and higher and see where your breaking point, where it feels kind of out of control. Then back off from that. And that's the tempo you're going to go into the audition with. At a certain point, for those of you who are very, very technically proficient, this piece can be played pretty fast. But there's also a certain point where even though you might be able to play it fast, it may not sound as musical. Poco allegretto is not a really, really fast tempo. It's kind of a lively, but less than allegro, a little bit allegretto. So even 70 in a way is a little fast for that kind of tempo marking. Here's an extreme, okay, here's 90. Okay, it kind of worked, right? I mean, all the notes were pretty much played for the most part. It sounded really frantic. So, think the most important thing in your audition is musicianship. Speed is not there to impress. Speed is there, maybe will impress just for a moment, but your goal is to make a beautiful sound, play even rhythms, okay, so your pulse is nice and even. This is all eighth notes for the most part. Play them nice and even, play with dynamics, and just be accurate and musical. That's the main thing. Find your tempos and practice in small units, okay? Record yourself a lot on your phones. Find a little app. For me, actually, the Tonal Energy Tuner has a recorder app on it. And another app that I'm very, very fond of is called Voice Record Pro. And it looks kind of like this. And it actually has a fantastic sound. It's a free app. So I would get some recording apps and record yourself. Listen back to yourself. Use your metronome and be your own sort of teacher. Oh, and one other thing. Study privately. Find a teacher, your band director, a student who's a year or two higher than you. Seek out some assistance so you're not doing all this on your own. We need some support when we work through things like this and work for competitions like this. So we need some guidance and support and learning. That's the way this process works. So thank you all very much for watching, and I hope that you all have a great audition. Play musically, play with a good sound, and enjoy it, okay? Thank you very much.